Welcome to Tales from the Rabbit Hole. I'm your host, Mick West. My guest today is Brad, an electronics engineer and expert in mathematics. Brad likes to keep an open mind about any new idea or new claim that he encounters. This led him to give a bit more credence than most people would do to the flat earth conspiracy theory, but his math background allowed him very quickly to figure out that it was false. We talk about how a strong grounding in math and science can help people get out of the rabbit hole as quickly as possible. So Brad, welcome to Tales from the Rabbit Hole.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you, Mick West.
Yeah, I'm very glad to have you here. You're another person on the podcast who I met via Metabunk. Like, you posted on Metabunk, and you posted a few very interesting posts about your history with various kind of conspiracy theories like flat Earth. Tell us a bit about, kind of before you got into that, one thing you mentioned was that you watched the movie Zeitgeist.
Yeah, way back when I was a teenager, I think I watched that, and it had a lot of information about like corruption and how 9/11 was an inside job, and I kind of didn't have a lot of meaning in my life, so that movie kind of just gave me meaning. I don't really remember what the meaning was anymore, but it gave me some sort of kind of purpose or goal in life, I guess.
You remember how old you would have been, like 15 or 16, something like that?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie, Zeitgeist. It's a blend of 9/11 conspiracy theories and the monetary stuff, and then there's a bunch of strange religious stuff as well. Were you religious at the time when you saw that?
I mean, I went to church. I wasn't religious, because I remember I was just a kid when I went to church, and I didn't really get anything out of it. I didn't even know what the numbers on the wall meant. I realized later those were the pages or the verses that were going to be discussed that day.
I think a lot of people people have religious backgrounds like that, and then they get into other things in a way, kind of replacing their religion. Like, I remember when I was in my late teens, I was kind of searching for meaning, and I was like going to esoteric bookstores and things like that, and thinking, oh, maybe I'll become a sun worshipper or something, just because it would be kind of a fun thing to do, not because I believe that the sun was a god or anything, but it's just, there's something attractive, I think, about believing in something.
I kind of didn't have any really meaning at all. I just kind of went to church. I was like, what am I going to do? I'm just going to have to go to church, get married, have a family, work some more to raise a kid, then die.
Well,
that was my life plan at that point.
Yeah, but
so I needed something else.
So, you watched Zeitgeist as a teenager, and that kind of like, you didn't really get into it though?
No, it just kind of spoke me on a subconscious level, I guess. I can't remember any of the details, really. I was thinking I might watch it before we did this podcast, but I couldn't find the time.
So after Zeitgeist, what would be like kind of your first brush with this kind of like esoteric beliefs like this, like flat Earth and things like that?
Well, I'd say like I said, opened my mind to different ways of thinking. And then obviously I went to university. I studied for an electrical engineering degree. And I guess you probably have the experience too of like being an undergraduate, and then your mind just opens to this whole world of possibilities in a good way. Yeah,
in Manchester I went to college and studied computer science, computation they called it back then. And it was, it's a completely different world when you go to college. Like, I grew up in a smallish town, and all of a sudden I'm in a big city surrounded by loads of people, loads of clever people. So it can be quite mind-altering going to college.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's hard to explain.
So flat Earth. Tell us about your first experience with flat Earth.
Well, the first experience with that was I just kind of met a guy online who was extremely confident, and then I tried to I got to talk him out of this. I went on a search just to find someone who was a flat Earth believer, just to kind of talk them out of it, and I couldn't. And actually, they won. We had like a little one-on-one debate, and he actually sort of won the debate. And I thought, that can't happen if the Earth is round. Like, surely all people are open to the facts. And
so you won the debate with this guy, and he won the debate with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you then start to try to figure out what went wrong in the debate?
Yeah, I was wondering how was I knew, because I thought I knew the Earth was round. I'd seen the pictures from space, and I've used GPS, and I've seen the moon. I watched Apollo17.org. That was really interesting. They have like this whole chronological exposition of the entire Apollo 17 mission. So that can't all be wrong. So I was thinking okay, how is this guy more confident than me? Right? That's what shook me up.
Do you remember the arguments that he used at the time?
Yeah, it was something like he showed me that the first photo from space or
Hmm.
something where you can't really see the curve of the horizon because it wasn't taken from very high. And then he
Yeah.
said that's the last photo they took from space. Everything after that is just Hollywood CGI. And it's like, well, how do you counter that?
I suppose like if you simply claim that everything is fake, then it's kind of a hard thing to disprove that it isn't.
Yeah.
So how did you set about like trying to convince yourself that the Earth wasn't flat?
Yeah, well, I had to do some sort of experiment. Like I had to do something that the Greeks did, something like that, like the Eratosthenes
Hmm.
experiment. That's a bit of a pain because you got to find two different latitudes and you got to really use a lot of information. It's a large distance that they measured. That was out of the question. So again, and I think the simple experiment is like if Earth is a ball. Actually, maybe.
Oh,
Here we go. Yeah.
all right. So you've got a big spreadsheet with. Is this a spreadsheet you made?
Yeah, this is basically just the same thing as your curve calculator, but I had to do it myself just to make sure that there were no mistakes.
Because you have a math background, so you would understand all of the equations needed for figuring out. Yeah, the I think that's one of the big problems with flat Earth people is a lot of them don't have a very good math background, and so trying to explain things to them, you kind of it's an insurmountable hurdle in some ways because you
Yeah.
can't actually explain math to people who don't understand math.
Yeah, I remember being in grade 12 and asking the teacher, like, what is sine of x? I mean, I know what it is now. It's just like when you just calculate the ratio of the opposite over the hypotenuse. But then it was very difficult for me to understand that in high school. It took a while to.
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of think back to when you didn't understand things. There's lots of things with computer programming I did not understand. Like I remember once somebody asked me when I was like 15 or so, what's the hardest thing in programming that you know of? And at that time I said arrays, which is one of the
Mm,
simplest things possible in programming when you're an actual programmer. It's just this trivial thing in programming. But back then it
mm.
seemed like this bizarre, strange way of doing variables where you have lots of different instances of the same variable. What does this all mean? And
Yeah,
it's fascinating to like just remember when you didn't understand anything. And I think it's kind of useful if you try to apply that to other people as well. And they don't. They've got no idea of things that you think are really simple. They just don't know. Anyway, back to you did some math, you did your spreadsheet, and you got like curve calculator where you can figure out how much of things should be hidden in the distance. And then did you go and actually do some observations?
yeah. I was very lucky that I had like a stretch of island that I do a lot of videos on the Wiggles channel, I guess. So I'll throw that name out there now. But yeah, that's just all the observations I did. That's basically all I did is just there's this stretch of ocean. It's like 66 kilometers to
Mm.
Bacalou Island from the beach. And then there's this big bluff right next to it that you can just climb up. So, I mean, that's perfect for,
Yeah, that sounds ideal.
yeah,
Uh,
if Earth were flat, then you would see the island from the beach. So, it's the perfect opportunity to contradict the globe model. And
yeah.
as I was driving down the road, I was like, oh, I really hope I see that island, or I really hope I don't see that island from the beach, because if I see that from the beach, that's going to be hell. That's
You weren't just like debunking there; you were actually investigating for yourself. You were trying to figure out for
yeah.
yourself whether there might be something to this flat Earth thing.
Yeah,
But
just I didn't know what the shape of the Earth was at that point. I had a moment of looking around. I was like, maybe the Earth is flat. I mean, it looks flat. I don't
it,
feel motion. I don't see curvature.
I know it does look flat, and I think that's what gets a lot of people. And when I say a lot of people, I don't think there are really that many people who believe in the flat Earth. It's one of the least well believed conspiracy theories out there. If you look at the surveys they do, it's always right at the bottom down there with shape shifting aliens. In fact, shape shifting aliens actually get quite a bit more belief depending on which version you ask. But yeah, a lot of people they get into it because it looks flat because it's so big. It's you look out, especially over the ocean, and you get this huge flat looking thing with this horizon which also looks flat.
I just wanted, before we moved on too far, I just wanted to describe my descent in the rabbit hole. It's kind of like, it was like a slip and slide down the rabbit hole, and there was a trampoline waiting for me at the bottom, which was my background in mathematics, and just bounced me
Mm.
right back up. Kind of, so
That's
that's
a good
the
way
way
of
I think
putting
of it.
it. It's like you had not a parachute, but yeah, like you say, a trampoline at the bottom. Because it's almost like I don't know, like you got some kind of antimatter or something that when it touches this stuff, which is completely impossible, you know how to figure stuff out, and because you do, you just be repelled from it because you know that it's false because you can do the math. Whereas a lot of people cannot do the math, and so they stay stuck down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, they were not fortunate to have a trampoline waiting for them.
So did you kind of take this knowledge and kind of go back and try and convince people?
I tried to, yeah. I kind of participated on in the YouTube flat Earth community, and I think when I enter the chat room, it's kind of they get a kick out of me because like my name is like Wiggles, it's a silly name, and they all kind of think I'm kind of stupid and dumb, which kind of makes them less afraid of me, which I think is a good tactic.
That is good. But then you roll out these mathematical explanations. How do they react to those?
Well, the one that sticks out in my mind is they just say like math and equations are just numbers on a page which don't prove anything. You got to go out and actually prove it.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, if I'm going to communicate results, I'm not going to use English. I'm going to use mathematics because mathematics is the better language here.
I think something that they mean there is that they want you to actually go and measure the distance with like a tape measure from the beach to the island, which is, it's kind of, they demand these direct measurements when you're doing, essentially direct measurements by doing line of sight. But you can't actually do the measurements that they require, so it's like a get out of jail free card for them. They say, well, unless you actually measure the distance to the island, how do you know how far away it is? And if you've not actually checked the line of sight to see if it's straight, how do you know it's straight?
Yeah, I think they are kind of a little bit past that now because I'm trying to do the observations in a way that, like, when I'm showing them the videos I recorded, I'm trying to do it in a way that, like, it appeals to their senses. I'm just like, that thing is far away. Here's the beach. Here's my feet next to the water. There's a hill up there. I'm going to go up there. So I don't even really need to do any measurements because, again, I had to convince myself that the Earth was not flat, which is not hard to do at all, really. But then I got to do the measurements in such a way that they will believe my senses. So I think they're kind of past the point that, like, because even like that guy Ranty, he's a flat earther, and he actually made a video about one of my videos, but basically he agreed with me that when I went high up, I could see the distant island. When I went low down, I couldn't see the distant island. So, I mean, he agrees with that.
But he still thinks the Earth is flat, and you think there's some kind of reason why this happens, which it's actually quite hard to understand what's going on in their head when they think these things are explainable. They see a distant island, half of it is below the horizon, and they think that somehow is consistent with a flat Earth. How do you explain that to people? How do you get through to them?
Well, I think I'm more empathetic because I was a flat earther for one day. On the drive down to the beach, I was a flat earther. On the drive back, I was back in reality. The way to be empathetic with them is like, I think they had, it's like, actually I was recovering from a flu the last couple of days, and I was thinking like, well, when you get sick, your body kind of like, your immune system revs up and your disease has to pass. So it's the same thing with this kind of flat earth belief. I don't know, I'm just taking a stab in the dark here, but it's like their flat earth belief, it has to pass in a certain way. They have certain questions they need answers to. And if they don't get questions to those answers, you're not going to erode their flat earth belief, maybe. Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah, no, it's kind of like you've got to actually get past certain things. There's a set of things that you wouldn't be able to persuade them with one thing because they always have these other questions. Like if you explain that the horizon obscures mountains, then they will ask, but water always finds its own level, so it should be flat. And then you have to get an explanation for that. And then they'll have some other thing. I don't know what the standard flat Earth things are, the go-to things are. There's no real pictures from space. They'll make that claim, based on nothing other than other flat Earth people telling them that there's no real pictures from space.
I think now in the community right now, July 26, 2019, I think the atmosphere acting like a mirror, like that post I made on Metabunk, because I just put that there just because that's what a lot of them seem to be using as a rebuttal to the globe now. It seems to be their one contradictory claim, I guess.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of what happens is they reach for something that will explain one little thing, and then they try to shoehorn that into explaining everything. Sometimes you can see a reflection of something in the distance because these heat reflections that you see on a hot road, you see those over the ocean sometimes, and so they think, oh, that must be what's causing everything. And then they say, well, the atmosphere is acting like a mirror, and then they say, well, that explains everything. But of course it doesn't. It just explains one tiny little thing in one particular location, in one particular situation. And if you expand it out to other things, like, why is it making 10,000 feet of this mountain disappear? It just doesn't work.
I mean, we got to give them an A for effort, but you got to give them an F for failure.
Yeah, they certainly do. So, yeah, you posted that you were kind of vulnerable to these types of ideas. You want to talk about that, like what your kind of state of mind was, and how it made you more open to these types of things?
Yeah, I don't even really understand myself, to be honest. I just know that I'm open to ideas. If I hear an idea that makes any sort of sense, like if it, like I have my beliefs. Everyone has their beliefs that get them through the day, and then because you need certain beliefs to repel information, but I try to get as rid of many of my beliefs or axioms as I can. The only ones I really hold around are the Zermelo Fraenkel set theory axioms. There's the first 5 of those I'm really intimately familiar with, and then the rest of them, well, they're not really, no one agrees on a number. No one even knows what they are.
What are they? Is it some kind of mathematical thing that I've never heard of?
No, it's just in the 1900s, that was a big time for mathematics because the analysts sort of realized, math was falling apart, right? The foundations of mathematics were in tatters. They needed some rigorous axiomatization of mathematics, or they had nothing. So they struggled, and because Cantor came out with there were multiple sizes of infinity, and people were oh, go away, Cantor. No, that's not true. There's only one infinity, but there's infinite cardinalities of infinities. What I mean, number 1 is bigger than 2, right? One, that's one thing, and this is 2 things. But then if you have infinite lists of things, there's also, you can count Aleph naught, Aleph 1, Aleph 2, Aleph 3. Those are your increasing cardinalities.
Yeah. Different versions of infinity.
Yeah, but it's really hard to condense this in a way that's going to be accessible to a lot of people. That's my problem. I'm too technical.
I can just imagine the flat earthers starting to zone out.
Yeah, and to finally answer your question, why am I vulnerable to flat Earth beliefs? And I said I had a few beliefs that get me through the day.
Right.
But I try to minimize those because beliefs are bad, but you need a few. But if a piece of information comes in that is not contradicted by my belief system, by my system of theorems created by my axioms, which is to just use logical terms, if something is not contradicted by that, well, I have to either accept that as an axiom or I got to integrate that in some way. And so if any information out there doesn't contradict what I believe, then I accept it until I can disprove it.
That's an interesting... So if I told you I was a robot, would that contradict any of your beliefs?
I mean, I've seen lots of evidence of you acting like a human, so
I'm a very good copy of a human, perhaps.
Yeah, you passed the Turing test. But I took that question seriously because that's how I operate.
A lot of the flat earthers, they have this very fundamental philosophy in a way, in that they don't believe anything unless it's been shown to be true to them personally. And you kind of, in a way, saying you don't disbelieve things unless you have some evidence that they're not true. But I mean, there are things that are pretty ridiculous, like the idea that all the birds were killed in the 1950s and replaced by robot birds, which are spying on us, which is this joke conspiracy theory that's out there. Now, you wouldn't really need any investigation to dismiss that, or would you actually accept that it might be true before you did any work?
Well, initially, I've never heard that until now, so I accept it for the moment, and then I try to see if I can contradict it using logic. Because, I mean, I did university logic. I got a 98 in that, and that means I failed in my mind. But, just the logistics of that don't make sense. How are you going to kill every bird, right? Some of them might be hiding.
That's a good point. Yeah. Let's come out and start breeding. Yes, there's obvious problems with it. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of way of thinking about it, is that you accept that things might be true straight away, and then you try to find problems with it. And I think it kind of can work, but I think the problem is if you're not very good at finding problems, if you're not very analytical, then you accept things as true, and then you're just simply not able to figure out why it's not true, and then you just continue to accept that it's true. Like the flat Earth thing, people think, well, what if the Earth is flat? Let me try to debunk it, and then they can't.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of them say. They say, like, I had the various stages of being a flat earther. I mean, like, yeah, so stage one is you hear about flat Earth and you think it's stupid. Two, you doubt something your teachers, your government, NASA told you and wonder if the flat earthers are onto something. Three, you actually research flat Earth. So you watch some YouTube videos, whatever, that's what they call research.
Mm-hmm.
Then you finish throwing out everything you were taught in school, and you finally and then stage 5 is you realize the Earth is and always was flat. So what that comes from is that was a failure for them to debunk it. They just didn't have the tools needed to debunk the claim that Earth is flat. So they stayed down in the rabbit hole. I would have stayed there too.
I think most people most people don't actually have the ability to debunk flat Earth, but most people actually don't question the standard model either. So you get people. I think if everybody suddenly had the mindset that we had to check everything for ourselves, then you'd get millions of people believing all kinds of things just because they don't have the ability to figure things out.
Yeah, so I kind of, when I was a math tutor in the university math center, I made this kind of joke about we do a sanity test. Because like a sanity test is a logical fallacy, but like, you know, if you have to make a statement, if you have a universe, like a programming, you have a array, say, and you have to verify that a statement is true for every element in the array, then you have to test every single element in the array. Now, sanity check means you just test the first couple, maybe one in the middle,
right.
And then if you pass, just say it's true for all of them. It's a sanity test.
Yeah. I think this kind of leads to an interesting point. There's a lot of people, when they talk about debunking, critical thinking and things like that, they say that people need to be taught how to do math and how to understand science. I think this is something you said yourself, that people should, learn things like Ohm's law, which is great if that was a possibility. But I think realistically, a lot of people are not going to be able to do that, and certainly from where they are now, they're not going to be able to get to an understanding of things like electrical resistance and simple algebra and things like that. And it's like, so the question is, like, is the answer teaching people how to do critical thinking and how to do math and how to do science, or is it teaching them how to evaluate the science that's out there and how to determine what a reliable source is, what science is good science? How can you teach someone to determine what science is good science without actually teaching them science?
Yeah, I think they got to do both of it. They got to learn how to do science themselves, and they got to learn how to evaluate what's already out there. That's just the way. And we live in a sea of information, so we need strategies for dealing with these big data we live in right now.
I think a problem though is that most science isn't really useful for most people in their daily lives.
It's useless, yeah.
Yeah, it's even algebra. Some jobs use algebra. It's just if simple things like construction, they sometimes use simple algebraic things. But sometimes people, they're working construction and they're working things out, but they have these strange rules of thumb that they use. But most people, they do their science at school, they do biology and physics and chemistry to a certain degree, and then they forget most of it because most of it isn't really relevant. And it would be great if everybody knew science to be able to evaluate things, but they can't.
Richard Feynman had a quote on that. He said something about if you got to get kids interested in science early, because by the time they get to university, it is too late. They have lost their curiosity.
Yeah, I think that's very true. So then, what do we do now? Like, we've got all these people who are, they're older than teenagers, millions of them, and they don't know very much science and they don't know very much math, and they're having doubts about things like 9/11 or flat Earth or chemtrails. We can't teach them science, though, can we?
Yeah, that's a tough question, Nick. That's I gotta find an answer. I want an answer to that myself. And I guess the gut reaction to that is people got to take a slice of humble pie. They got to admit there's kids out there smarter than them, and they got to just maybe go back to high school and sit with the kids, or go to Khan Academy where you don't have to embarrass yourself by relearning high school.
Yeah. Yeah, I think perhaps if people are actually getting into these conspiracy theories, then there's kind of a reason for them to do the work. They really should be learning the things behind these things. The everyday people, if they don't want to do it, then there's really there's no harm, I think, in not knowing science. I kind of feel bad saying that though, because I would really like everybody to learn science, but realistically, they're not going to.
Yeah, I mean, there's simple science out there. I mean, I guess you can measure the drop of acceleration, for example. You can drop a thing. It's actually tough. I did this because I was like, gravity came up in the flat Earth community, so I was like, okay, I'm going to measure gravity now. And so I just like dropped an object. I just had a tape measure next to it. Then I could like plot displacement versus time, extrapolate the acceleration that particle went through.
You're measuring gravity essentially.
Yeah, but even that's really tough. It's like, what's the simplest science experiment out there? And I think, well, probably figuring out the Earth is not flat is probably the simplest experiment out there. You just go to the beach and see if the ocean has got a big hump or not.
So you said something interesting in one of your messages, that you spent time on a Discord server, like a chat room. This is like a voice chat room.
Yeah, there's all these sort of underground flat Earth chat rooms where people try to climb the flat Earth pecking order, is the way I would describe it.
The flat Earth pecking order. How do they do that? How do you progress in this pecking order?
So, like, I remember there was a hilarious episode of Bob's Burgers where, like, the turkeys just took over the town, and, like, then there's this character who has this amazing voice on Bob's Burgers, and he's like, yeah, the turkey's got a pecking order. It's like, they know that this guy can outpeck that guy, and then everything is stable because they know who can outpeck who, and then there's the guy at the top who can peck anybody, and then so then to take the town, but since the pecking order was destroyed, and it was just complete anarchy, right? Turkeys just pecking people and other turkeys everywhere. So in order to take back the town, I think Bob's wife, she just started pecking Bob, right? Because he was a big kind of guy, right? The turkeys were afraid of him a little bit because he was big, but they could peck him. But then when they saw his wife pecking him, right? Like then she started pecking around, and all the turkeys got scared of his wife. I forget his wife's name, but that restored order because the pecking order was restored. So that's what a pecking order is. Now, in flat Earth, I think what's going on is like, can you embarrass someone by not knowing something, right? Like if, you can throw out a question as them like, what is density? And if they can't answer in a couple seconds, like, what is density? Anyways, I gotta answer that. No, that's mass per volume. Yeah, so I would survive that peck, I guess. Like I would. I would climb the pecking order a little bit because I knew that definition. But then there's people at the top, like Mark Sargent, who can outpeck any flat earther, I guess.
So like, you say there's all these flat Earth chat rooms. Are there really like lots of different ones? How would you kind of characterize the scale of this this society? It's
underground, so we don't know about this. It's all underground. It's the dark net. It's the information we're not aware of, I guess. Really? Again, they were there. I was in a few, but I don't know how many there are out there at this. And they're hidden very well. Like you can't just get into them, right? There's like the 24/7 Discord, and then there's like the one with QE and this other guy Nathan Oakley, and there's but you get banned from them really quickly if you if they think you might be able to outpeck them. So.
But it sounds like it's the same names coming up, based on the numbers of people that are actually in these things. That it's a pretty small phenomenon.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like when you do surveys, you get 2% of the American public think that the Earth might be flat, which is what is that, like 5 million people or something like that, 6 million people. Which probably isn't correct. It's probably just noise. People just randomly checking things on these surveys. I'm sure there's a significant number of people who lie on the surveys. But yeah, it's not that many people. And I think this is something that people need to understand, that about a lot of conspiracy theories, is that there usually aren't that many people who really believe it and really are into it. Even with some of the more widespread ones like 9/11, you maybe get like a whole mass of people who say, oh yeah, maybe 9/11 was an inside job, maybe there's like, a significant percentage of people who believe that, but the actual number of people actually involved in 9/11 truth is really quite small, and much lower with flat Earth as well. Did you ever get into looking into things like 9/11 conspiracy theories?
I
Recently?
haven't actually. I saw it in Zeitgeist, and then I kind of just didn't know. Like I kind of maybe throughout my life, I just maybe it was an inside job, maybe it's not. But if I were to bet money on it, I would bet probably $1,000 right now on the spot that it was not an inside job. So.
Do you avoid looking at conspiracy theories because you worry that you might get sucked into them because of your openness to these ideas?
No, I'm not afraid of any idea at all. But the reason I'm not looking into this 9/11 thing is because if I ever do, I'm purposely remaining ignorant on it so that I can sort of go into a rabbit hole with someone else, and then I can grab a hold of them, and then when I land on my trampoline, I can come up with them. Maybe.
Yeah, well, that'll be an interesting thing. Okay, so you talk about math a lot, and you've taken like graduate courses in math. Which is, I mean, maybe you didn't finish all of your courses, but it's vastly more advanced than the average person. Like I did, I think, some undergraduate courses in math as my first year of computer science, and it hurt my head so much. I just could not wrap my head around these advanced calculus stuff that they were doing back then. So I didn't take math after that. What is it about math that kind of immunizes you against conspiracy theories or provides you with this trampoline? Is there something specific about math versus, say, physics?
Well, I guess it's just like when you talk about beliefs that get you through the day, like some people believe they're a good person. They believe that they're going to work doing something useful. For me, the beliefs that get me through the day are Euclid's 5 postulates. Mm-hmm. So, like, if you have a point, you can draw a straight line between any of those 2 points. I mean, that gets me through the day.
Yeah, and you said that other people should learn Euclid's postulates as well.
Yeah, because I have the book Euclid's Elements, the most important book, maybe the most important book of humanity. I mean, it's up there. It's next to the Bible. It's next to the Quran. It's next to the Torah. It was the math Bible.
But I think, again, if you were to read it to the average person, it's like, what? What do these postulates even mean?
The easiest way to get into Euclid's Elements is there's this app called Euclidia. It's just like an app on your smartphone, and then like you can just like prove a bunch of theorems on it, and instead of like proving a theorem sounds like daunting, but no, this is levels. It's basically all this. It's like levels of the game, and you prove various theorems, and it's a lot of fun. Actually,
that sounds kind of cool. Yeah, and do you think it's accessible though to someone who doesn't have a background in math at all?
No, Euclidia is definitely accessible to anyone who understands what a circle and a line is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was fascinated with geometry when I was young. I was trying to do things like trisect the angle.
Apparently that's impossible.
Yeah, it's a famous impossible problem, which I think for a long time they didn't know was impossible. And I didn't believe them when they said it was impossible. It's the idea that you can divide an angle exactly into 3 using only a compass and a straight edge and a pencil, I guess. So, do you want to talk about your landlady story?
Yes, I do. That was hilarious.
Take us back to the start of that story, though. What actually happened there?
Okay, so what happened was this was a horrible living condition. Like, I would not wish this upon anyone. I would not wish it was like basically an atheist, a Hindu, and a Christian all live in the same house for 3 months, and it's like the start of a joke. But yeah, the Hindu got along with her just fine, and he was a cool guy. I went skydiving with him. Never again. But actually, when you talk about chemtrails, I mean, I'm remembering the landlady story, but when you talk about chemtrails and like clouds being made of ice crystals, remember the cloud that I went through was like little pricks on my face. I was going through it. So the clouds are made of ice crystals or whatever. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That one probably wasn't though, because you'd be too low for it to be ice crystals. It was probably just you were going so fast when you were falling through it that you were. What was your parachute open at that point? No, you wouldn't do that until below.
No, we were at terminal velocity at that point.
Yeah, so that was probably just the water droplets. Clouds up to a certain level are made of water. Above that level, when the temperature gets cold enough, they're either water or ice, and then a certain level they're always ice. But anyway, We're getting off topic. You have an interesting landlady story.
Yeah, so I love tangents, but I could talk
Yeah,
on
I love
tangents about
science and
tangents, but I
cosines.
won't. So, yeah, so but yeah, she had all these rules in her house. It was like, and she was a bit of a not. She was a bit of a conspiracy person herself, but she had this rule where it was like, in order to save power, she had to unplug. She demanded all her residents unplug the toaster to save power. Now, me being an electrical engineering student, immediately knew that was false. Like, immediately. Like, I had my knowledge, I had my belief that knew that was wrong. So I actually just forgot. Then I left it plugged in all the time, and she would flip out at me all the time for leaving it plugged in and wasting her power. I told people at work, like the electrical engineers at work, like the seniors there, and they were like laughing, and they're like, "Oh yeah, maybe there's capacitance between the two wires, and there's a little bit of, a few, maybe tens in it, maybe a couple femtocents of current power or whatever." They were like just laughing at how ridiculous this claim was. So then, but it wasn't funny for me because I was scared, I was anxious. Like this woman would I startled easily, and she would be yelling at me, causing anxiety, to the point where I would be at work till 4 a.m. some nights trying to avoid her. So I was like, enough of this.
All because of the toaster?
Yeah, all because of I wouldn't unplug the toaster, and she would yell at me, and it just blew up, right? So I would hide from her at work until 4 a.m. They must have thought I was crazy. But I did get more work done. That's the main thing. Yeah, so I did what you said in escaping the rabbit hole. You described like spotlight and floodlight. So this was laser light. It's spotlight debunking is what this was. I was going to show her that there was no current flowing through the toaster. So I put that in line with the toaster, and I measured the current that the toaster was when it was plugged in and switch engaged, and when it was plugged in and switch unengaged. And I showed her that the current draw was 0, basically. And then she said, many times she tried to say, "I'm going to get Art here, my electrician. And he'll show you you're wrong." And I said, "Ruth, bring him in. Here's the voltmeter. Here's the resistor. Here's the toaster. Tell him to calculate the power draw of this thing when the switch is up. He will tell you exactly what I've told you." And then I said this to her so many times that she actually broke down in tears when she realized that she was wrong about this. And it was an emotional thing. I was hoping this would be funny, but because there is humor in it, but it's an emotional thing. It's what it turned into being. So
yeah, and that's interesting because it's not a huge belief, really. It's just she was just wrong about this one thing.
Yeah, but what that was fundamental to her belief about the smart meters being a conspiracy against her, the utility company having a conspiracy against her to extort her, right? And I got her to show me her electrical bill, and it actually wasn't that high, but she believed the government was against her. I didn't really listen to her when she started going on about that stuff, but showing her that she was wrong about the toaster, it just toppled the dominoes that she had for worldview.
So did she change her mind about other things then after that? Like about smart meters?
I actually don't know, but because she was a bit nutty and I didn't talk to her that much. But she seemed happier when I finally left. Like when she left, she gave me she asked Brad, give me a hug right when I left, because I guess, and she thought that her and my crossing paths was some sort of spiritual thing for her, because she was a very Christian lady. Really believed in Jesus. Like we brought her screwdriver once, and she thought the hand of Jesus had brought her the screwdriver through me and the Indian guy. It's this kind of way she viewed the world. But she gave. I was like, yeah, I'll give you a hug. I mean, I hope you do well, and I hope she is doing well now.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's. I think a lot of people have these moments where one cherished belief gets knocked down, and then it starts them on the road out of the rabbit hole. It's like there's two different things. There's with you bounced out straight away. You kind of played with the rabbit hole a bit, but then discovered it was nonsense. There was a guy in my book. In the book, he basically he heard about 9/11 the first time, and he thought, oh my god, the government did 9/11. It's an inside job, and he was into it for nearly a week, I think. And then his brother told him things well, gravity brings things straight down, so that's why they fell down in a straight line. And he was like, oh yeah. And I think that's similar to you. You kind of flirted with the idea for a bit and examined it, and then discovered it was false. But a lot of people, they get down the rabbit hole, and they explore everything down there, and then they have one thing that comes through, and they say, if this is wrong, what else might be wrong? And I wonder if it could be something as simple as, the toaster does not draw power when it's plugged in.
Yeah, when it's off and plugged in. Yeah.
Yeah, when it's plugged in and off. And that belief, from her point of view, isn't entirely unreasonable, because
No.
you get told about parasitic power for things like TV and amplifiers and things. And if your TV's plugged in and switched off, a lot of the time it's drawing power.
And the funny thing
Regardless.
was, she left her TV plugged in.
Which would have been about a million
Yeah.
times as much power being wasted as this toaster. Yeah, so I guess that's it's a good lesson in that if you can convince somebody about a deeply held belief, it doesn't have to be the one that's like some big conspiracy theory. I mean, it was just a mistake essentially on her part. I'm sure it was related to these other things, but it's something that's on the line between her reasonable beliefs and her unreasonable beliefs. But it was something that was solidly in the camp of her beliefs, which she thought were reasonable, but were actually not. Yeah, I wanted to talk a bit more though about these chat rooms. So I'm very interested
Okay.
in the idea of like it's not really the dark web. The Discord servers, they're just private Discord servers that you're on. You're not actually
Yeah, the
going to
underground flat Earth community.
you're not going via Tor browsers. How
No.
does it differ from like the stuff that shows up on YouTube? Like on YouTube, you get them chatting with each other, and they're public chats. Is there a difference between what flat earthers do in private versus what they do in public?
The difference is public and private. So, like in public, whatever you say is broadcast, etched in stone, is etched into the internet. So you're going to be careful about what you say. But when you're on the Discord server, you can just joke around and be a little let your guard down kind of thing. And I was actually accused of that, like, because I was talking with some flat earthers, like some guy right the hand or whatever. I remember names and details, but I was talking with him and we were having jokes, and they were like, "Oh, they thought I was a pretty cool guy for a Glober." And then as soon as we went on the public talk, I started, well, I'm not going to joke about Earth being flat anymore, or like, I'm not going to make any sort of misconstrue myself as a flat earther because the Earth is round. I'm a very educated person, and I want to get that across to people. So I want that to be my public image. I don't want my public image to be that I was a flat earther for a day. That's just a
Yeah.
joke, right? The public image is you got to strive for your public image. So I had to do that, and they got really angry at me because I started being right about stuff, essentially.
Do you think
And
like a lot of what they do is just kind of like for social reasons, like they're just having fun hanging
yeah,
out, and they just
that's a
keep
big
doing
part
it?
of it, I think.
It is. I mean, it is fun just chatting with them. I've actually chatted with the flat earthers for a while, and it's a lot of them are fairly nice people. A few of them are not, but there's a lot of nice people there. It's fun to chat, and it's almost like they keep doing it. That's what I'm thinking about these private rooms, these underground meetings. It's like they're having a little party in there.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I wouldn't know because I'm generally not invited.
All right, so just finish up. Like, suppose there was someone in the same situation as you, like back when you were interested in this type of thing. Maybe they don't
Hmm.
have your background in mathematics. What advice would you give to someone who's starting to look into flat Earth and giving it some credulity?
I don't know because I'm afraid anything I say is going to be backfired effect. So maybe I would say nothing. Actually, I would just look at them. I would
Right.
just listen to what they said. Maybe that's it. That's all I might do.
Tell them that you
So
would.
I say my ears are open. That's all I would. Maybe that's all I would say. But if I had to say something, I would say geometry. The etymology of the word geometry means geo means earth.
Mhm.
Metry means measurement. Geometry means measurement of the earth. And Euclid was not a flat earther because he lived in Greece, ancient Greece, where they measured the circumference of the earth, and he would have been in these academic circles.
I suppose they would say that's all fake, though.
Yeah, there was one guy, Pete Shea, I mentioned that to, and he said, like, oh, well, Euclid probably didn't exist, and you can't know what you're talking about with this stuff. And, like,
Yeah.
So they got other questions that they need answers to. So really, you got to see what questions they have in their mind. Because like some stuff they'll just accept right away. Like I remember I told Pete Shea, is like he just asked me really quickly in one of these hangouts. It's like, if you go up a hill, does the air get less dense? And I said yes. And he's like, so then he took that immediately. He would accept that without question.
Yeah, so the simple observations like that anyone can make, that I think maybe you can point out to people. Yeah, I think I would give them your example of looking at an island that's distant and looking at it from different heights. I think that's a great experiment people can do to demonstrate that something is obscuring the bottom of the island.
It's a great experiment if your mind is open, yeah. But the flat earthers, because I'm always thinking about, I still haven't figured it out. Why are people believing this? And I think maybe it's just they have certain questions. So flat earthers, articulate your questions and answer them yourself. Articulate your question. You have questions. Articulate them the best you can for yourself, so that you can figure out exactly what answers you need.
Yeah, and I think understanding what the question actually is a good start, because other people they don't really have good questions, and that's kind of
they're confused. They don't know what they want to know. They don't know what they don't know. They're confused.
Yeah. And we don't know what they don't know either, so it's hard to help.
Yeah, we're confused.
Yes. A lot of the times I'm very confused by flat earthers. I'm like, what is going on in your head where you can't see that this is being obscured? But anyway, that's all a bit off topic, but well, is there anything else you'd like to talk about in the remaining minutes?
Yeah, I was saying to my friends, I was like, man, I was excited that I was going to talk to you, because I don't know if you know something in background, but the Tony Hawk Underground game, and I think you were involved with that.
Yeah,
as I understand.
Yeah. I was the technical director of Tony Hawk's.
Yeah, so I mean,
Underground.
I'm flabbergasted to be in the presence of you right now for that.
Yeah, I think I found that game programming is actually being quite useful in terms of debunking, because there's a lot of things that went into making games like the Tony Hawk games, where the things you have to think about are similar to what you have to think about in debunking these conspiracy theories or investigating these videos and things. So if someone shows you a picture of something that's either visible or not visible, then you can work out in 3D what's going on. Which most people can't, but then you can do that, and then you can figure out a way of explaining it to people. So it's quite handy being a computer games programmer. And people kind of mock you, or they mock me, and they say, "Oh, it's just a video game programmer." But actually, it's one of the best things that you could be if you want to be interested in kind of neutrally debunking things. All right, Brad. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for being a guest. It's been a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. It's been a pleasure to be on the podcast. I was been looking forward to this for weeks.
Yeah, well, it's been fascinating. Thank you again.